Well, hi everyone. I'm happy that you're here. I'm happy that I get to be here to talk about vegan desserts for the Essential Vegan Desserts course at Ruby. It's April. I can't believe it's April. Time is really going quickly, but I'm always happy to when live event day comes around and I see some really interesting questions that I will get to. Anybody who would like to ask a question, on the right side of your screen, there's a question queue. Just type it in and it will come up. And I'm going to try to get to all the questions. If I can, I may ask you another question to clarify if need be. So I want to introduce myself. I'm Fran Costigan. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the director of vegan pastry at the Ruby Online Culinary School. I've been here for I think 5 years, maybe a little more. And vegan desserts are my passion. I became a vegan. I was trained traditionally, and that's very important to this conversation, meaning I know how to make desserts correctly. But because when I was working as a pastry chef over 25 years ago, before I was vegan, I have been vegan that long actually, for 25 plus years, I wasn't feeling well. And I read a book called Food and Healing by Dr. Anne-Marie Colvin, who was the founder of the Natural Gourmet Institute in New York City. And her book was called Food and Healing. And Dr. Colvin said, well, she put it out there, what you eat will have an impact on how you feel. And it made sense to me. Now, I believe that we are all bio-individual, but I was clearly lactose intolerant. And that's really what happened. I never felt a lack of foods or things I could eat when I became vegan, because I think that there is so much more to eat. The plant-based world is enormous. So I was happy about that, but I wasn't happy about the desserts back then. And those of you who have been coming and have been listening to me or reading what I write know that I was horrified, really. Horrified is kind of a strong word, but I was really unhappy when I went out into the marketplace to get some vegan desserts. And if you liked brown, dry, gummy things, cakes and cookies, you were set. But that's pretty much what was available then. Of course, we didn't have the ingredients that we have today. And even as importantly, we weren't following, the pastry chefs weren't following foundational technique. And that is really a core. It's a core, it's the underlying importance for all of the Ruby courses. You have to learn technique in order to make food that will be not only delicious, but reliably delicious, recipes that work. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I mean, in the scheme of things, vegan desserts are a younger category of desserts. But when, except for the occasional cake that was called the accidentally vegan depression cake, because during wartime, no eggs were available. And some bakers figured out that baking soda and vinegar and the normal things you would use to make a cake, the really keystone chocolate depression cake was cocoa powder and flour and sugar and baking soda and vinegar, and the cake rose. And that cake is still around in different incarnations today. Of course, we've been able to tweak it and make it taste even better. But once I saw that, I knew that I could go back into what I had learned during culinary school and apply those techniques to vegan ingredients. And then some of you know this, one day my tasters were jumping around and they said, that's a chocolate cake to live for. I knew I had cracked the code. So I'm really, really excited about it. I will say that I never expected to see the growth, this enormous exponential growth in this category as we have today. It is enormous. The day of the ubiquitous vegan fruit and sorbet plate that was offered if you went out to a restaurant or to someone's home, that's gone. Thank goodness. This is 2022, not 1980. And the trend to offering unapologetically delicious, indulgent, modern vegan desserts that are suitable for everyone, whether dietary considerations are an option or not, or an issue or not. That is what has seen the exponential growth. So to point that out, I mean, this is a huge category. And I have gone from having to defend vegan desserts insofar as saying, please try this cake, to saying, no, it really is vegan because good is good. So in the chat box, in the question box, you're going to see a link to an article that was in Newsweek just this week. I was contacted I was interviewed for this article specifically about vegan wedding cakes. Now, when a traditional legacy media comes and is talking about specifically vegan cakes and wedding cakes at that, you know that something is up. And there has been a lot of that lately. So Richard is going to show you some of the work. I answered the questions, and then I put an SOS, an ASAP. Can some of my students in our private Facebook group for Essential Vegan Desserts, I said, I would like to see some wedding cakes. And the students, 3 students, well, more than 3, got gorgeous work to me really quickly. And what was really thrilling is that the editor of this article used 6 of these photos, which is just wonderful. So I will tell you that because there weren't links, just names in the article, the cake with the kind of rice paper garnish is Marie Jose Dome, and she is in Montreal at the Cateau Vegan Club. It's a restaurant. And Marie Jose had been, before she took Essential Vegan Desserts, a cake decorator for many years, but decided it was time to learn vegan. And she's doing magnificent work. Mandy B, the photos that say Mandy B, she is in Phoenix or Scottsdale, Arizona, and her company is called Positively Frosted. And this is Mandy's full-time work. She makes these beautiful, beautiful party cakes. And then we have Angie Agar from Pure and Simple Vegan in Alaska, who in one of her cakes was there. So I'm really proud of them. They're really beautiful. And I think they go a long way to saying, yes, vegan is here. I mean, I know in the article they said the percentage of people that are vegan. And of course, when you're making a dessert that happens to be vegan, and that's the way I think about it, you want everyone to enjoy it. And why not? So, you know, if you're in hospitality, you know that, or if you're a living, breathing person, I would like to say, you know that desserts are arguably the most important item on the menu. I mean, how many of you yourselves or you know people who sit down with a menu and then they look at the desserts first? It happens. And if you aren't in the hospitality business, for sure, you can count on the fact that someone's going to come into your home someday with a vegan person, a guest. So let's learn how to make these desserts and make them really well. I am really going, I know that many of the people here are already vegan, but there is some confusion, and I thought that this event was a good time to really go back to basics and let's talk about what makes people seek out vegan desserts and what are vegan desserts and what are they not. So people seek out vegan desserts for personal health, for health of the planet. They might be limiting or eliminating dietary cholesterol, either by choice or the doctor told them that they needed to. Vegan desserts do not contain cholesterol. People who are following PARV diets, 7-day Adventists, Buddhists, and sometimes during Lent, rely on vegan desserts. Food allergies. We probably all know people with food allergies. Now, that doesn't mean that people within the vegan community don't have some food allergies, but the common ones that bring people over to needing vegan desserts or seeking them out is lactose intolerance, which honestly, we all are lactose intolerant, and egg allergies. And more people are worrying about the recurring reports of salmonella and other pathogens in foods such as eggs and dairy. For the most part, then, or with one exception, and the one exception that's a little like this is honey. Vegans do not eat dairy. That's milk, butter, cream, any dairy products, cheese, yogurt. Eggs, not even free range. You might think that's a ridiculous thing for me to be saying to you, but I get that question all the time. I get the question, well, if the eggs are free range or my backyard chickens, if I make a dessert, is it going to be vegan? No, no eggs, no animal foods, no gelatin. Very easy to replace. We have a unit in Essential Vegan Desserts on using gelatinizing agents. We use agar, which is a sea vegetable. It's been used for millennia. It works really well. And white sugar processed with bone char is not considered vegan. So you'll see in the market, if you've been in the market, you certainly are aware of the fact that you'll see organic cane sugar, vegan cane sugar, fair trade, hasn't been processed through bone char. It is not pure white. And it hasn't been bleached. It's not pure white because it retains a little bit of the molasses that's inherent in the cane, and pretty much that's it. Now, here's what gets a little sticky. Vegan desserts are not automatically gluten-free. Many of you, I'm sure, know that, but not everyone does. So they're not automatically gluten-free, but many can be made gluten-free, and many are just naturally gluten-free. Vegan desserts are not automatically healthy. They're dessert, they're a treat, but can be made healthier. You can choose a healthier dessert. You can have a baked apple. You can have a poached pear, for example. That's going to be a more healthful choice than a cake. But the cakes that we make in this course don't rely entirely on white flour, white sugar, and certainly not these shortening laden desserts. And the other thing is, can they be really good? Well, yeah, they can be absolutely delicious. And in fact, I hear from people very frequently, this tastes better than what I remember the traditional counterpart. And that really, there's a reason for that. And again, we're talking about a dessert that is made correctly, but without the dairy, all the dairy tends to mute flavors. So you're going to get more of a flavorful result. Vegan desserts do not require odd ingredients. And that's another one of the real beauties of Essential Vegan Desserts is that the course is that we're making all of the desserts in the course, and they're by category, using pantry staples. There might be 1 or 2 or 3 that are new to some people, like agar instead of gelatin, or a sweetener that might not be on your radar. But basically, no special equipment and no odd ingredients. Now, for the for the people out there who are thinking, well, Fran is saying the global vegan market is big. In 2019, it was valued at $2.77 billion, and it's expected to grow at a compound annual rate of 10.1% from 2020 to 2027. So I would say that it really behooves us all to learn about vegan desserts. We all want to celebrate birthdays. We have holidays coming up, or holidays all throughout the year, and we should be able to provide vegan desserts to people. So that's what I have to say about that. I would like to answer some questions now, and remember that you can put questions in to the queue. Oh, I'm also going to ask Richard, who's here, kind of making sure this thing goes, to put the link to the private Facebook group in the queue, because anyone who is in Essential Vegan Desserts or has been in Essential Vegan Desserts can join this group, and it is a wonderful place to get to know other people, ask questions. Well, maybe you were looking for a new stand mixer. You might want to ask people about that. If you are in the course and you have a question of a technical nature, then you'll write to support@ruby.com and someone will get back to you really quickly. And you can always write to me at fran@ruby.com. And that, anyone here, you don't have to be in the course in order to do that. So let's see, I've been watching the PBS documentary about Benjamin Franklin, having nothing to do with desserts, actually. And it's really interesting. And I'm in Philadelphia, and it's certainly pretty Philadelphia centric, because this is where all the things happened way back with the founding farmers. But I'm moving my glasses around a lot today and thinking there's a part in the documentary where they show that Benjamin Franklin, and some of you may be aware of the fact that he just invented so many things, he cut his glasses in half to make it easy to see distance and close. And I just may have to be doing that. So Sarah says, what are vegan dessert staples you should always have and are versatile? That's a really good question, Sarah. So we're talking about staples here, and I think it's a really good idea to start small. Think about what it is you're going to make. Of course, this is going to be different for people who are producing things, perhaps, and the same would go for equipment. So I always have all-purpose flour and whole wheat pastry flour. I use organic flours. That is a personal choice. That's up to you. But today they're very easily found, and I store them in my refrigerator or freezer. I have different sweeteners. I always have organic cane sugar. I have whole cane sugar. US brand that is a very popular brand is Wholesome Sweet. And what that is it's still cane sugar. It's brown. I use it kind of as a brown sugar replacement often. It retains all of the molasses in the cane. And I will tell you how I pre-prep these things. I also have coconut sugar and maple sugar for treats. So those are my basic granulated sweeteners. But if you're starting small, you don't have to have them all. Liquid sweeteners, maple syrup. I think maple syrup is the best sweetener. And it's pretty much the sweetener that I started with when I started baking 25 years ago, because we didn't have organic cane sugar. We didn't have coconut sugar. I mean, I'm sure we had it. It's around, but it wasn't very readily available. I like maple syrup, dark. It used to be called grade B. Now it's grade A dark. Rice syrup, which can be a little more difficult to find. And what other syrup? Oh, and I like date syrup, which is also known as Ceylon. That's Silan. That's an ancient food, and it's made from steaming dates and pressing them and straining them. And I also like sorghum, which is it's a cereal grass. So they all have different flavors and you want to get to know them. You don't, again, need all of them. If you're talking about basic, versatile ingredients, I'd say the two kinds of flours. If you're baking gluten-free, then my favorite gluten-free baking flour mix is Bob's Red Mill, 1-to-1, all-purpose gluten-free flour, baking flour. That's what he calls it. It's got some xanthan gum in it. It's got the blue label. And for me, cocoa powder, both alkalized and non-alkalized, so you see them in the stores really as natural and Dutch process, are part of my pantry, as is chocolate. And plant milk, because you want to be able to, we're replacing the dairy milk. My favorite plant milk is oat milk these days because it takes care of all the allergy situations. You have people who are soy avoiders. They might be allergic or they have been misinformed. I think soy milk, plain just soy milk, soybeans and water is a very nice plant milk to have, but there's almond milk, there's, oh my gosh, all the plant milks. So I like Oatly oat milk the best. And in terms of fats, I like organic oils. I think the best oil, fat, I have to use that word fat, is grapeseed oil. No, actually, I like grapeseed oil, but I have switched over to sunflower oil. I think it's almost buttery. And if I'm doing an Italian cake where I want the taste of an olive oil, I'll use olive oil. When I was learning to do this, there were no vegan butters. My first job, I was given this really nasty smelling hydrogenated margarine to use. And I was kind of horrified because aside from the fact that it's really very unhealthful, it didn't taste very good at all. And I also think that agar powder or flakes and some starches, which most people have. So most of the things I've mentioned are in a baker's pantry. So organic cornstarch, arrowroot tapioca, that works. So thank you for that question. Lolita says, I've tried to make a key lime pie so many times and failed every time. What's the key to getting the pie to bind? Well, that's a kind of a big question, Lolita, and an important question, and something that we do. We have a unit in the course on binding because we are not using eggs. One of the functions of eggs is to bind things. So I don't have your recipe, but I will say that I think the best way to get something to bind, and you don't want something that's hard, you want it to be nice and soft in your mouth, but hold together when you slice it, is a combination of agar and a starch. A starch slurry like arrowroot or cornstarch. And then you could try an egg replacement if you need to. Tofu, a lot of people use silken tofu when they're making something like a key lime pie. So that should work. I want to kind of just put this out there that you really no longer have to reinvent the wheel when you are, craving a particular vegan dessert or you've been asked by someone to make a vegan dessert. Today, there are so many reliable recipes that are already vegan out there. But I want to caution people, and I bet some of you know this already, don't just go out to that, web, Google search and pick a recipe where you don't know who wrote it. And it's just, don't do that. There are a lot of really good recipes, and I'm pretty sure that there are recipes for key lime pie that you can find as well, Lolita. Zinnia, hi Zinnia. Do I have a recipe for chocolate truffles? Oh my gosh, do I? I wrote a book called Vegan Chocolate, Unapologetically Luscious and Decadent Dairy-Free Desserts. And the whole first chapter is chocolate truffles. That is a dessert that I think is super. They're naturally gluten-free, and they're very few ingredients. You just have to know how to handle a ganache. Now, hold on a second. I'm going to show you something. Because actually, in addition to getting ready for this, I am getting ready to bake for Passover, and that's my family's holiday. And also, I'm bringing some Easter cakes to people. So this is a bowl of ganache that I was just keeping warm over very barely warm water. So ganache is typically a percentage, it's a proportion of heavy cream and chocolate, and sometimes other things are added. Sometimes butter is added and other fat, other flavors. And depending on the proportion, you get something like this. I know I'm going to be covered in chocolate in a minute again. So this is a ganache that would work to glaze a cake. And but if I put this in the refrigerator, it is going to firm up. To make truffles, you make more like I'm just looking at that, a 1-to-1. So 1 part chocolate probably and 1 part milk. I like using a rich milk. I like using oat milk, works very well to make truffles. You can also infuse the milk with spices. So if you want to make kind of a Tex-Mex or a spicy truffle, you can infuse the milk with ginger or with ancho chili powder, with all kinds of interesting flavors, and then strain the milk and make your truffles. Another important thing is that you need a quality chocolate. You're not going to be making truffles, I hope, with chocolate chips. Chocolate chips are what's called heat-resistant chocolate. They're not supposed to melt, right? Chocolate chip cookies. And they don't have enough cacao mass in them to be a quality chocolate. There are so many good chocolates in the marketplace today, and the only way you're going to know which ones you like and which work is for you to do some tasting. But it's very important to use the percentage chocolate that's listed in the recipe. So for example, my truffles and my ganaches are made almost exclusively with 70 to 72% chocolates. Now, you still need to taste them because you might think that all 70% chocolates taste the same, but they don't. They just don't. They're very different. And the other thing is that we have different palates. So some people might say, oh, that really tasted dark, and other people think it tastes sweet. So good luck with the truffles. They're really easy. It's a beautiful confection to keep around. I almost always have them in my freezer. And while dairy milk or dairy cream is that's a traditional truffle, I have a truffle recipe that is made with chocolate. There's always chocolate, orange juice, tahini, and some vegan honey-ish. And that's a nice thing. Some people, do raw dates and raisins and balls and call them truffles. To me, that's a different kind of confection. For me, a truffle is a chocolate-based dessert. So make them, keep them in your freezer, treat the chocolate carefully, follow the rules. Okay, let's see. Dana, she's going to grow an herb garden this year. Oh, that sounds great. I can't wait to get out to my terrace and plant my herbs. This is a very interesting question. What herbs pair with desserts, and how can I know which go best with which? Again, this is kind of personal. It depends on your palate. I have been loving using herbs in my desserts. I do an agar-based very, very lightly gelled fruit soup. And I like using, actually like using rosemary, which is pretty strong. If you don't like rosemary, you won't like that. I've used rosemary, thyme, but that, carefully, because it is strong. I like using the different thymes. I like mint. I would like to know from other people what kinds of things you like, but oh my gosh, have a good time with that. And it's just a wonderful thing to do. We have mint comes in a lot of different flavors now, but we can go so far beyond mint. I like thyme, and I like rosemary, and I like lavender as well. So I'd like to know what you like. Claudia wants to know what can be substituted for oil in dessert. She needs to limit saturated fats. Okay. Well, Claudia, within the vegan dessert category, we have different kinds of desserts. So people who tend to be whole food plant-based are limiting their fat or not using it at all. Within the course, we have a whole unit on how to replace fat. So it just depends. Oftentimes we use applesauce, or I happen to be very fond of prune puree. Any kind of a fruit puree will help when you are substituting oil, whether you're taking it out completely or just limiting it. And you can get some really good results. They aren't going to be exactly the same. If too much is used or the recipe is off, you might get a kind of a bouncier dessert. You're not going to get that real tender, fluffy crumb. But that said, and forgive me to those of you who have heard me say this practically every time I speak, I made Rip Esselstyn's wedding cake. So Rip is Engine 2 diet, and Dr. Esselstyn, his father, wrote How to Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. They are very esteemed people. I adore them. I wasn't going to make cakes for Rip, for the Esselstyn family, using oil. So I just tested and tested and tested. And when you do a test, you cut a recipe in half. I certainly hope you'll do that, or even by a quarter, and see what happens. I actually preferred just leaving the oil out. I didn't put any fruit puree in, and it worked really nicely. I think Rip's been married probably 20 years now, so I'm still playing with that. And I just recently did add some applesauce to the cake, and I like that as well. So it can be done, Claudia. Oh, great. Laura has a great suggestion on the herbs, and that's lemon balm. Yes, I'm going to try to grow that this year, Laura. That's a wonderful thing to use. I mean, today in Philadelphia, it's almost 90 degrees. So I kind of wanted to get out there and plant this morning. But of course, I don't know what it will be tomorrow. So we'll see. Thank you, Laura. That's a good suggestion. Julie wants to know, have you made agar-based frostings or custards for frostings and fillings and baked goods? If so, do you have any tips for making them creamy and pipeable? Well, yes, Julie, I do. So when you're using agar, now agar, just think of agar as gelatin, only it's not, it's from a seaweed. It's not seaweeds. It's not animal-based. It's not bovine-based. And it sets things up. So you can do all kinds of things with agar. But if you want something that's creamy, then you combine it. We combine them with a cooked starch slurry like arrowroot or cornstarch or tapioca. And in fact, we have a frosting in the course that I developed for this very reason. And it is agar and starch based. It sets. When it sets, you always want to do a test, because unlike gelatin, if your agar is too soft or softer than your intention, you can add more. If it's too firm, you can add more liquid. So they are adjustable, which is really wonderful. But in this case, when it's properly made, it's going to be hard. It's going to be set. Let me not say hard. It's going to be set, but creamy. Set enough so that sometimes on different holidays, I'll cut out, I have cookie cutters and I'll do hearts and flowers and all kinds of things. And it still tastes creamy. But in order to make this creamy and pipeable, once the mixture is set up, set firmly into the food processor and cream it and cream it and cream it in the food processor, and it actually does pipe and hold beautifully. So that's something that most definitely can be done. Thank you for the question, Julie. Diane wants to know, is there a way to make sweet cakes and or breads fluffy? The recipes I've tried result in very heavy texture. Well, I'm sorry about that. I've been there. And Diane bought a commercial vegan cake for a shower, and it was also heavy, but delicious. Okay, let's say it should be light and delicious. It goes back to learning to make cakes properly. So I believe in weighing ingredients. You weigh ingredients, you keep notes on the ingredients. You use the proper mixing technique. You sift the ingredients. All these different steps, assuming you have a good recipe, are going to give you a very light cake. The intention is that I'm serving you, I wish I was, a cake, a slice of cake or a sweetbread, and you're not going to know that it was vegan unless I told you, because it has a beautiful crumb, a beautiful mouthfeel. In fact, in a couple of the assignments in Essential Vegan Desserts, the students are required to, cupcakes and muffins, for example, to cut one in half so I can really see the texture. And they're light and beautiful. I'll show you. I mean, here's a muffin that I know is really light. This came out of my freezer. And this cake, it's very light. It's very light. And actually it came right out of my freezer. I have 2 different kinds of ganache on here. I'm going to do something else. I'm going to give people I'm giving cakes away this week. And here is a cake that was made in a heart-shaped ramekin. I think if I cut this in half, perhaps you can see that this is a very nice crumb. So it's just a matter of doing the right thing. I'm trying to think of what would be some of the reasons that, aside from a poor recipe, that a vegan cake would be heavy, is if the flours are wrong or there's too much egg replacer or something like that. I honestly very rarely use egg replacer, commercial egg replacer, because there wasn't any when I was developing the recipes, and my recipes work without them. So, but you can, today we have so many options. My goodness, we have commercial egg replacers. We have Aqua Faba. We have flax and chia gels. So there's a lot more to do. Hi, Martina. Martina says, I'm considering taking your vegan desserts course. She's gluten-free. Is that an issue, or are there substitutions? That's an important question, Martina. Essential Vegan Desserts is not a gluten-free course. The idea is to learn all of the foundational techniques so that you can go on and create your own, just as these wedding cake people did, as you can see. That said, many of the recipes are naturally gluten-free. They just are. Ganache is gluten-free. Our agar gels are gluten-free. Our puddings are gluten-free. People forget that there are foods that are naturally gluten-free. I would say that there's one recipe that I can think of, the pie dough, where It's an important learning exercise in the course, and that can't be substituted. But I have had so many gluten-free people go through the course very successfully. And unless you're celiac, I suggest to people who are gluten-free and in the course, make something the way it's written the first time, so you have a baseline. Take a look at it. How is the crumb? How does it smell? We should really be paying attention to all these things with food, and then give it to someone else to taste. But that's really, it shouldn't be a problem at all. You can write to me at fran@ruby.com, or if you have further questions, I'd be happy to talk with you. Gail wants to know, what flour do you recommend for pie crust? Well, I'm pretty definite about pie crust. Now, I make my pie crust, and the one in the course is made actually with a liquid fat, not with a vegan butter. I use 50% all-purpose flour and 50% whole wheat pastry flour. Now, whole wheat pastry flour, as many of you probably know, is not the same as whole wheat flour. The gluten is higher. The protein content of whole wheat flour, it's good for bread, not for pie crusts. We want them flaky. So I like using a mix of all-purpose and whole wheat pastry flour. Sandy wants to know, have you made whipped Aqua Faba to replace Cool Whip? That's funny because I grew up in a house with a mom who didn't cook. And so our desserts were these big ice cream half quarts in containers, cardboard containers in the freezer, and Cool Whip. And Cool Whip, I don't really remember what Cool Whip tastes like. I don't think it tasted great, but I liked it. Yes, I think that I have made Aqua Faba meringue. If there's anybody here who doesn't know what we're talking about, Aqua Faba means bean water, and I have a freezer full of it, and you can very easily whip it into meringue that can be baked, dehydrated into meringue cookies, pavlova. We use it in the course to make baked Alaska. We torch it. And so to make the Cool Whip type situation, I would add a little bit of a starch. I think, you can go and look in the library, the live events library. A couple of years ago, I had a guest. Her name is Ju Deaver, and she wrote a book called Aqua Faba. She wrote the book, and she is very precise. It was a wonderful live event. If you're interested in Aqua Faba, it's worth seeking out. But Ju does have something like a Cool Whip in there, so go for it, definitely. Shelly wants to know, and I see Shelly's got a badge, a Ruby badge. What are some of your go-to vegan chocolate brands? You're having a hard time finding vegan chocolate locally. Well, let's talk about what is vegan chocolate. So, I used to get confused when people said to me, well, what makes chocolate vegan? Because my answer back a couple of years ago was, if it's not milk chocolate, it's vegan. That's not necessarily true. And today, dark chocolates, non-milk chocolates, that's what I mean to say, sometimes they've got milk powder in them. So I have tons of chocolate brands available to me. What would make a chocolate vegan is that the sugar is a vegan sugar. For people what that matters, the sugar in the chocolate is vegan sugar. What about the sugar in vegan, in chocolate? The higher the percentage, the lower the amount of sugar that's in the chocolate, just by the way. So I have so many different chocolates that I like. It's really hard. I think I pulled a few out. I think I pulled a few out, she says. This is only some of the chocolate that I have. So let me put this down. Okay. And I will say this, Shelly, I think you're going to have an easier time going forward finding vegan chocolate because all of the big manufacturers and the ones that are really very good manufacturers but weren't vegan companies are coming out with vegan chocolate. This is Repubblica del Cacao. It is a brand of Valrhona. It's also fair trade. I care very much about not only vegan, but fair trade because there is still child slavery in the production of chocolate. I never use Hershey's for that reason. So that's Repubblica del Cacao. This is a supermarket brand. It's Choco Love. This particular one says strong dark and it's 70%. I don't think it tastes so strong to me, but that's to me. This one, some of you know Chef Char Nolan, who is one of the really popular instructors at Ruby, and she is a whole food plant-based, no oil expert and a really good friend of mine for a long time. So she took me grocery shopping to a store I didn't know called Lidl. Some of you may know it. And I was like, well, I'm going to try their chocolate, their store brand. It is delicious and it's fair trade. It's Madagascar dark chocolate, 70%. Absolutely delicious. So if you have that around, and then this is Beyond Good, which is another one for people who want to be certain about gluten-free chocolates. Then you're going to be looking at Enjoy Life, which is certified gluten-free. Shelly, look online. You should be able to get some chocolates online. Let me know where you're living. But because there are so many brands now that it is mind-blowing. You know, years ago, you had to go to a real specialty shop to get fine chocolate, but not so today. I'm sorry that you're having trouble with that. Oh, thank you for putting that in, the links in. Hi, guys. So let's see. Jennifer wants to know, what are the best desserts I can make for a family member who's unable to have dairy, peanuts, tree nuts, and coconut? Well, you still have a lot of ingredients left. You don't have to. I'm looking at that peanuts because one of my friends, Chef Kathy Gold, who did the vanilla live event with me, that's another one you might want to look at. It was very interesting. We did an event together last week, and Kathy took medjool dates, which are these beautiful plump dried dates, pitted them, stuffed the inside with peanut butter. She used a piping bag, put them back in the fridge to get cold. I'm just giving you a no recipe here. And then put them together and enrobed the whole thing in a dark chocolate. It was to die. It was like having peanut butter caramel, because dates, when they're cold, they don't freeze solid, so it tastes like caramel. That was crazy good, and I'm making them for my grandsons this weekend. But peanuts are a real big allergy, so you know, coconut as well. But there are make lemon, make chocolate, use oat milk. So when we take her out for special occasions, the chef will offer her a fruit plate. What did I say in the very beginning? I said the days of offering plant-based eaters, vegan people, fruit plates should be over. So you can have that chef talk to me. I'll tell him a thing or two. But I would say vanilla cake, chocolate cake, lemon cake, carrot cake. You don't have to use nuts in any of those things, and it should be fine. It should just be fine. Stephanie wants to know, what's the best substitute for butter and what plant oils are used? Well, when you're using an oil, you want to make sure, I think, that it is expeller pressed, that it is a clean oil. I like to use organic oils, and I like to use neutral tasting oils because I don't want to taste it again unless I'm making an olive oil cake. That's a different story, an Italian cake. So I do like sunflower, grapeseed, and olive oil. For butters, So I have a tray of butters here. This is Miyoko's. Miyoko's unsalted. It comes salted. You would use this as you would dairy butter for the most part. This is Miyoko's oat milk butter, which works for people who are allergic to nuts, but it's a spread and you can't use it, has more water in it. This is Flora butter, is what it's called, and it's a higher fat butter than is Miyoko's. So it works to make even puff pastry. So it depends on what you're going to be using it for. I didn't use butter in the beginning after I had that horrible experience with the vegan butters, with the hydrogenated margarine, but these butters are really nice. I personally don't care for the taste of Earth Balance, but that was an original non-hydrogenated. Whatever you do, pick up. I don't think I see hydrogenated vegan butters anymore, but you don't want to do that. So that's what you do, Stephanie. BB, hi BB, we were talking the other day. We were texting the other day. When a recipe calls for both all-purpose flour and whole wheat pastry flour for a cake, gluten-free bobs can substitute for the all-purpose. Now, BB, let's start at the beginning. When you look at a recipe, and my recipes very often will say, we'll have 50%, let's say 1 cup of all-purpose flour, 1 cup of whole wheat pastry flour. They're both wheat flours. The protein content is different, is really what makes them different. So if you wanted to, let's say this recipe had 1 cup of each, but you only wanted to use all-purpose, you would use 2 cups of all-purpose. If you wanted to use only whole wheat pastry flour, you'd use 2 cups of whole wheat pastry flour. So if you're subbing the gluten-free Bob's Red Mill 1-to-1, you sub it for both of them. That said, it's a little tricky when you're doing gluten, when you're substituting, a lot of chefs, you know this, you see recipes say use 1 cup of all-purpose flour or 1 cup of whole wheat pastry flour or 1 cup of gluten-free flour mix. And really that's not true, because sometimes with gluten-free, you have to do some other detail work. We do have vanilla cupcakes in the course. We have a standard one with wheat flour, and we have one that's made with gluten-free flour. And there's a slight difference in the way they bake. People like them both, but they're a little bit different. So I hope that makes sense to you now, BB. Hi, Shakia. How and what do you use to make mango homemade vegan ice cream or other flavors? Well, I love ice cream, and Laura, who told us to think about lemon balm, sent ice creams to me that were so crazy delicious. The flavors were so unusual. There's a golden milk, there's a cardamom, blueberry lavender. Oh my gosh, they're so good. So again, in my book, Vegan Chocolate, I have a whole chapter on ice creams, and the base tends to be, I haven't looked at that ice cream chapter in a while. And my ice cream machine is one that you just plug in and go, which means ice cream pretty quickly. I don't have to freeze anything. But coconut milk-based, cashew, cream-based ice creams in place of the custard work really well, and mango would be wonderful. I mean, you flavor that base. You want to, when you're making ice cream, you want to make sure that the flavor is a bit stronger than you think it should be, because once it's frozen, it will have muted a little bit. We're doing okay for time. SR wants to know, do I have a tip for vegan low-fat yogurt? I have a Forks recipe, but it's always runny. Making vegan yogurt can be a little bit tricky. I do mine in the Instant Pot. Jill Nessenow, the Veggie Queen, who has a wonderful book, if you like using Instant Pots, called Vegan Under Pressure, talks about that. Vegan yogurt can be, homemade vegan yogurt can be a little bit runny. So I don't know that particular recipe. I'm not going to be able to help you. Maybe use a little less milk than the recipe calls for, and maybe add a little more of the starter and let it go longer. Sometimes just letting the yogurt go longer is the trick. I think I have time for a couple more questions here. Let's see. Julia, is granulated sweetener better than liquid for cakes in terms of maintaining a nice crumb? I know you can sub liquid sweetener for granulated and cut back. That's an important question because yes, for the fact is a granulated sweetener, using primarily a granulated sweetener in a batter-based dessert and a cake is going to give you the nicest crumb, the nicest crumb. I tend to use a little bit of maple syrup in many of my cakes along with the granulated sweetener because that adds a beautiful moistness. But when you start with subbing liquid sweeteners for granulated and cutting back on the liquid and this and that, you really have to do a lot of testing, plus the fact that the liquid sweeteners are very variable. You know, maple syrup is kind of the standard for vegan, for giving you a nice vegan cake. But agave doesn't really work. Rice syrup is going to give you a gummy cake. Sorghum's, well, if you want, you know, for spice cakes, sorghum and date Ceylon is wonderful. I would say, you know, for not to use too much of the liquid sweetener. Randy wants to know, do I prefer the vanilla in powder form? No, I have all kinds of vanilla. Randy, go and look. I know the link is in this queue here. You might be very interested in the vanilla live event that we did. I have vanilla beans, vanilla powder, and vanilla extract. And I prefer vanilla extract. If I want a very strong vanilla flavor, I use vanilla extract that's called twofold because it's stronger. I haven't used too much of the powder, but I have some now, so I'm going to be trying it. Ted wants to know, is there a list of basic baking ingredients somewhere on this site? Not on this site, Ted. We have ingredient lists in the course, however. So that is where we do it. We let people know these are your basic ingredients. These are things you're going to want to have. But really, all you need to do is think about what ingredients, what is it that I want to make? You're making cakes, you're going to want flour. You're going to want, well, I left this very important basic ingredient out in the beginning. The very first question, you need baking powder and baking soda. I use aluminum-free double-acting baking powder. Why double-acting? Because it's a better baking powder. Why aluminum-free? Because I don't want to ingest aluminum. Baking soda and vinegar. So those are important ingredients as well. Diane said, I made a cheesecake from vegan cream cheese and it never did set up to be firm. Well, Diane, there are so many different vegan cream cheeses on the market now, and they all have slightly different flavors or pretty different flavors and consistencies. Maybe you had to bake it longer. The baked cheesecake, you know, I'm a New Yorker, so I grew up on New York cheesecake, really heavy cheesecake. And so I developed one for my cookbook. It's baked in a water bath and as a regular baked cheesecake would be. So again, you know, sometimes because I am not privy to the recipe, I can't really help you. But what I would say is, if it was pretty close, try baking it longer. Sometimes, very often, they have to be chilled before they're cut. This is the case with a lot of desserts, not only vegan desserts. If you make a blueberry pie, you need to let it set so the juices come together. So maybe that's what happened, or bake it a little bit longer, or bake it a little bit higher. So I hope some of you got your questions answered. I want to take this time to wish everyone a super happy, healthy, safe, joyful holiday weekend. We've got Good Friday and Easter this week and Passover. Speaking of Passover, I should show you. So this is called Matzah crack. It's Matzah Toffee. And it's just something that my family loves. It became a thing a couple of years ago. You take matzah, which has no flavor, and make a caramel, and then cover it with chocolate. And there should be pretty things on top of that. But my family likes it really plain. And the reason that I'm showing you this is all I had to do was substitute vegan butter for the butter in the recipe. So sometimes there's just one thing that has to be checked. But getting back to my good wishes for you, it's a really, we're living in really difficult times. I'm praying for peace. I'm sure we all are. And let's take this time over the holidays to regroup. Be careful out there. Philadelphia, COVID's back and mask mandates are in place. So let's take care of one another. Let's take care of ourselves. I want to thank you very, very much for being here. I look forward to seeing you in May. I have a special guest from across the pond, from the UK, coming to join me in May. So I hope I'll see you then. Thank you all.